Trudeau headed to the podium. Let's go to the grounds of Rideau Hall and the Prime Minister's daily news conference.
The United States have agreed to extend by another 30 days the border measures that are currently in place. This is an important decision and one that will keep people on both sides of the border safe. It's another example of the excellent collaboration between our two countries, and I want to thank Minister Bill Blair for leading the discussions with the United States.
This morning, I would like to confirm that Canada and the U.S. have agreed to extend border measures in place for another 30 days. This is an important decision that will protect people on both sides of the border. I would like to thank Minister Blair for having led these discussions with the U.S.
We're all here today, but it is the weekend. And usually, a Saturday morning in April means getting outside to enjoy the sunshine, having a friend over for coffee, or just taking the kids to the park. But these aren't normal times. We're living through an unprecedented public health emergency, and we need to keep responding accordingly. So even as the weather gets nicer, and even in the weeks to come as we start seeing hopeful news, we can't let up. Because if we do, we could lose the progress that we've made. Later today, you may see some new ads with people you know, like Hayley Wickenheiser, Chris Hadfield, and Dr. Tam. And they'll remind you to stay home and save lives. That's how we keep each other safe. So stay at home. Limit your trips to the grocery store to less than once a week. If you do go out, keep 2 meters distance from each other. And as you do your part, know that we're here to support you.
Later today, you might see new ads that show people that you recognize, such as David Saint-Jacques and Dr. Mona Demer, our Chief Scientific Advisor. They will remind you that we can save lives by staying at home. As I oftentimes say, everyone has to do their part. Over the past few weeks, we've announced historic measures to help you to go through this crisis. With the CERB, the wage subsidy, and loans to small businesses, we are supporting millions of families and workers throughout the country. We still have a lot of work to do. We still have people that we need to help. So today, I am announcing new support measures. Our government will allocate over $306 million to help Indigenous businesses. This funding will be sent to Indigenous financial associations and Indigenous organizations. We will allow businesses to have an interest-free loan and non-refundable amounts of money so that they can weather the crisis and recover. The investments announced today will help millions of businesses to hold on up until the situation improves, including many businesses run by Indigenous women. They hire people throughout the country. People are employed in many different sectors, and this is one first step. Soon, we will announce new measures to support Indigenous businesses as well as their employees.
I am very happy to announce that the government will allocate more than $306 million to give Indigenous businesses the support they need. This funding will be provided through Aboriginal financial institutions and administered by the National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association. It will allow Indigenous businesses to access short-term interest-free loans and non-repayable contributions, so they are better positioned to make it through and rebound after this crisis. Today's investment will help thousands of businesses bridge to better times, including many that are owned and run by Indigenous women. These businesses employ people right across the country, in small communities and big cities alike. They create good jobs in a whole range of sectors, so when we support them, we're supporting families and workers too. And this is just a first step. We'll have more to say soon on what else we'll do to help Indigenous businesses and the people who rely on them. Small business owners are at the heart of so many communities. And this is a tough time, whether you own a store, a restaurant, or are part of the hospitality sector. So we're going to be there for you. With this new investment and with measures like the Canada Emergency Business Account, the wage subsidy, and the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, we're focused on helping you. It will get easier, but until it does, we need to be prepared to persevere. And that includes ensuring that our frontline workers have the equipment and tools they need to do their jobs and stay safe. Yesterday, 2 planes full of N95 masks and coveralls arrived in Canada. More shipments will be coming in this weekend and into next week with additional medical supplies. I can also announce that we will begin receiving deliveries of face shields from Toronto Stamp very soon. They've shifted from their usual production of rubber stamps and ID badges and will be providing millions of face shields over the next 2 months. Le Canada continue de recevoir des envois d'équipements de protection.
Canada continues to receive shipments of PPE. Yesterday, 2 planes arrived with N95 masks and coveralls. Other planes with medical equipment will arrive next week. We are all impatiently waiting the moment where all of this will be over. We are all waiting for Saturdays where we can meet with our friends or bring our children to a birthday party. That day will come, but only if everyone continues doing their part. So during this weekend, stay home. Continue following the advice of our experts, and together we will persevere. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go to the phone lines for some questions. Just a reminder, it's 1 question, 1 follow-up. Operator?
Thank you. Merci. La première question, Michel Lamarche, TVA Nouvelle. À vous.
Oui, bonjour. Une petite question.
I have a question for you with regards to this agreement, with regards to the border closure. Mr. Trudeau, we seem to have a lack of equipment. Does this agreement allow for the same provisions for goods to be shipped? Yes, no, the same mechanisms are in place. So we allow for essential products and medical equipment and food to cross the border, our shared border, and we were going to continue to make sure of this.
Agreement is the same terms, just extended for another 30 days. It will ensure that we continue to get essential goods and services back and forth across this border.
Suivi?
Bien sûr, par rapport
Now, with regards to these masks that should be produced by 3M, we know that this was quite complicated given the guidelines implemented by the American President, Donald Trump. Didn't you think it would be appropriate to have extra guarantees so that those who are providing masks, gowns are able to do it easily, that we're not having to count only on China? Yes, it's extremely important for us to continue to receive essential equipment from different places in the world, including the United States. We were very pleased to be able to ensure continuity of shipments from 3M. We're continuing to work very closely with the American government to make sure that we will receive all the required equipment.
Prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. À vous la parole.
Merci. Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Thank you. Marc Garneau said that travelers would have to use masks to take a plane. So when will this guideline enter into play? With regards to Minister Garneau's announcement, I have to highlight that right now we are banning all non-essential travel. We don't want people to start traveling, whether they have a mask or not. It's more important to stay home. That is what will allow us to protect against COVID-19. This is a measure that will continue and will help people in situations where social distancing is impossible, such as in a plane. Now, with regards to the measures that will be implemented, once we begin to ease up on the measures, we are under discussion. We are having lengthy discussions with scientists and experts to see what will be the best measures to ensure the protection of Canadians. And we will have more to say on this as discussions take place and as we get closer to this reality.
Oui, Alex. En suivi, Monsieur Trudeau.
Follow-up question. With regards to this agreement with the U.S., with regards to the border, there was an issue with regards to asylum seekers. Has anything been changed in the agreement? The agreement is the same. We have renewed the agreement for an extra 30 days. We're going to continue to make sure that our values and our principles as a country will be respected.
Merci, thank you. Next question, Teresa Wright from the Canadian Press. Your line is open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. The Conservatives want 4 in-person sittings each week in the House of Commons with a reduced number of MPs, and they argue that the daily ministerial announcements happening in front of the media could be done in the House of Commons. What's wrong with that?
I think, first of all, it has been extremely important that every single day the Canadian public gets informed of measures that we're putting forward. We are putting forward new measures almost every single day, and I think it is essential that the media continues to have access to asking questions to better inform and ensure that Canada is functioning the way it needs to be. Part of that job in our democracy is ensuring that there is accountability through our parliamentary systems, and that is something that we are also very much focused on. We have proposed that the House of Commons return in some fashion every single week to permit engagement on accountability and also pass further measures to help Canadians. Right now, we're in a situation where MPs across the country and their staff are wondering if they're going to have to get on planes tomorrow and fly to Ottawa. Obviously, that is not something that, from a public health standpoint, we should want to see happening. But right now, on the books, the rule is Parliament needs to reopen fully on Monday. That's obviously not a good idea, which is why we've proposed measures going forward that we're discussing with the other parties, and we certainly hope that we're able to come to an agreement so that we don't all have to convene in the House of Commons on Monday morning.
We're still having discussions with other political parties. We've suggested that the House could have sittings every week to ensure that the opposition can ask questions of the government, but also to adopt measures that will help Canadians. The reality is that on Monday morning, 333 MPs and their teams are supposed to be in Ottawa for the sitting of Parliament. Obviously, it would be a very bad idea given the current situation. So we've made proposals to try to make sure that we can do things differently so that we can keep our democracy healthy while ensuring that people are safe. We truly hope that the other parties will agree with some of the measures that we're suggesting. I think that it would be a real problem if we had to go back to the House of Commons on Monday morning.
Yes, many people on social assistance programs are surviving on less than people who are getting the CERB. And many marginalized Canadians will simply never be able to access the CERB as it is structured. Rather than continue to tweak it, why not just make the CERB universal?
We moved very quickly on replacing income for people who lost a paycheck because of COVID-19. These are families who were relying on that next paycheck to be able to pay for their rent, to be able to pay for groceries, to be able to support their children and their parents. This was the absolute priority that we needed to move forward quickly on, and with the moves we were able to make, over 7.5 million payments have been made already, and there are obviously many more to come. At the same time, we recognize the particular vulnerability of marginalized communities, of particular groups, and that's why we have put forward significant measures to try and help them, whether it's through shelters, through support for charities and charitable organizations, or extending measures so people who work a very small amount of hours a month can still receive the CERB. These are the kinds of things that we're looking at, and we're continuing to move forward on getting the help out to people that we need to.
Thank you, and we'll take one more question on the phone. Operator.
Merci, thank you. Next question, Christopher Gooley, Detailly, your line is open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. You've been holding regular conference calls with the premiers during the COVID crisis, but why have you not reached out to the opposition leaders in a similar way, particularly when you're governing in a minority parliament and one that has not been convening regularly?
We have been in very close and ongoing conversations with opposition leaders, both me directly and mostly through ministers and officials, and regular briefings that happen from Health Canada and officials to keep people apprised on these issues. But you're absolutely right that we do need to keep our institutions and our parliamentary principles strong, which is why we've proposed that Parliament could come back in a modified way every single week to ensure accountability, to ensure that we can move forward on legislation, and that's what we're very much hoping we're going to get agreement on from all parties, because the alternative would be returning to Ottawa on Monday morning with a full House of Commons and all the staff associated with, and I think we can all recognize that that would be a mistake at this point.
And a follow-up, Chris?
Yeah, some of the changes your government has made, though, to the Canada Emergency Response Benefit for workers, the wage subsidy initiative for businesses, and the recent revisions regarding emergency loans and commercial rent assistance for small businesses were proposed by the opposition parties. So do you now think that looping in the leaders could save valuable time and get programs and money out the door sooner?
We have been looping in leaders and opposition members from the very beginning. Indeed, the proposals on expanding, on filling gaps have come from MPs of all parties, including many, many Liberal MPs who've been passing the message through. We know that Canadians are working together in unprecedented ways to fill gaps and to respond to these challenges, and it is wonderful, quite frankly, to see so many suggestions coming forward, many of them that make it into tweaks and improvements and changes to programs that are designed to help as many Canadians as possible. It is a great sign of collaboration and solidarity, of Canadians working together on leaning on each other, on being there for each other, just like we're seeing outside of the political world as well.
Hi, Prime Minister. Crystal Logue with Global News. Today you said small business owners are at the heart of so many communities, but small businesses are terrified about the possibility of getting out of this and having enormous debt piled onto them in the form of rent deferrals and loans. The fear is that if they're either going to run out of money now or a year down the road, these businesses have legally been forced to close and yet still legally have to pay rent utilities. Have you considered financial aid that would not have to be repaid or discuss rent forgiveness or control with the provinces? We
have discussed the issue of commercial rent with the provinces. I had a good conversation with them on Thursday evening where this came up. We are looking at it very, very closely. We have a number of proposals that are working their way through the system, talking to various industry groups and renters associations, as well as looking at the provinces. The provinces have jurisdiction over rents and the relationship between landlords and tenants, so we need to work with them, which is what we are doing. We recognize there are very different realities and systems right across the country, but we also have heard very, very clearly from small business owners that the wage subsidy is helpful, but fixed costs are a real concern, and that is something that we're going to have more to say on soon.
Ian Wood, CTV News. Prime Minister, BC's seen some success flattening the curve and has indicated they might look at loosening restrictions. You've said it's too soon to be doing this, and meanwhile, provinces like Ontario and Quebec are still in the thick of it. Are you concerned a difference in messaging and measures will enable people to disregard what's in place now? And are you going to allow provinces to make the decision on reopening, or will the federal government need to give a green light?
I think Canadians understand that what we are doing now has been tough, but is essential on getting through this in the best possible way. And Canadians are also really worried that if we reopen too quickly or too soon or in the wrong way, we could find ourselves back in this situation a couple of months from now, and everything we will have sacrificed during these months will have been for naught. So we are being very, very careful in how we move forward as a country. I have spoken extensively with the premiers about this issue, and everyone recognizes how cautious and careful and vigilant we need to be. There is a real desire to ensure that we are coordinating our messages, our guidelines, the principles that will underline how we move forward. But of course, the situation is very different right across the country from one region to the next, and the measures that they will be able to move forward with at various moments will vary as well. That's going to be an important part of the recovery here. We need to make sure that we're working together as we have been in an unprecedented way between premiers and the federal government and municipalities and various other communities to make sure that we're doing the right kinds of things and that we're sending the right messages to Canadians every step of the way. But the message remains that we have to be extremely careful to do this the right way in a coordinated and collaborative way.
The Canadian meat industry is saying it is facing a crisis as processing plants have to close or slow production because of COVID-19. And the Canadian Federation of Agriculture has said that your government needs to prioritize food production so we don't have shortages. We've heard the government is considering all options, but what are they so that Canadians can feel confident that they'll be able to buy meat and food in the coming months?
I think ensuring the continued flow of groceries and our food supply chains is absolutely a priority. But so is arresting the spread of COVID-19. So is ensuring that workers in all industries across this country can remain safe. Getting that balance right requires us all to step up very carefully, because we need to make sure that, yes, we are continuing the flow of great Canadian food to people, and indeed we need to ensure that we have as much domestic food security and stability as we possibly can. And that means taking advantage of the summer months that are coming up and the growing season and the planting season now. At the same time, we have to make sure we are doing things that are keeping farmers, agricultural workers, producers and transformers safe. And that is what we're very, very much attentive to now.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Ashley Burke, CBC News. Harvard researchers have suggested that there needs to be at least 500,000 tests being done a day in the U.S. in order to safely reopen the economy. What is the specific number of tests that Canada needs to hit daily to safely ease up restrictions here? I think
every day we are working on new technologies, on better coordination, on accelerating the pace of testing. It has been somewhat uneven across the country. There are places that have done very, very well. There are some places that have faced challenges that they are busy overcoming. But we are confident we are going to be able to significantly ramp up testing. And all the premiers recognize that extensive testing is an essential part of any plan to loosen the controls on people and start reopening or restarting the economy. This is something that the federal government is very much engaged in with the provinces, ensuring there are enough tests, there are enough swabs, there are enough reagents. These are the kinds of things that we are all working on together. We know we have to do much more than we're doing now, and we are tracking towards doing that.
Many of the cases in Canada have come from those returning from the U.S. Trump's talked continuously about reopening the U.S. You said today the border agreement's going to stay in place, but if the U.S. does loosen some restrictions in the next few weeks, what kind of health threat does that pose to Canadians?
We have the border restrictions in place where non-essential travel across the border will not be permitted. We will continue to take the measures necessary to keep Canadians safe while ensuring the continued flow of our essential supply chains on which so many Canadians depend. Okay. Nous allons continuer
We will continue to be very vigilant with regards to our borders and our international travelers. We will continue to work jointly with the Americans to ensure our safety. We have extended the measures at the border. At each and every step, we will do what's required to protect Canadians and to ensure continuity of our supply chains.
Tell us what the impact on Canada's stockpiles has been for PPE when the government closed so many of its warehouses across the country.
Over the past weeks, we've been focused on delivering PPE to the provinces, on delivering the necessary equipment to ensure that our frontline workers who are putting their lives forward to keep Canadians safe are properly protected. The efforts continue. I mentioned 2 plane loans coming in over this weekend, more coming in over the coming days. We are confident that we are in a good place around PPE and will only get better as more and more Canadian producers and suppliers come online. It has been something extraordinary to see the level to which Canadian manufacturers have been stepping up to get involved, and we are in a much better place than we were a number of weeks ago. Of course, there is a need for continued vigilance, and there will, of course, be many lessons learned on how Canada can be better prepared for any future outbreaks than we were this time.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau, Philippe Vincent Foisy de Radio-Canada. Une question peut-être un peu simple.
I have a simple question. I would like to know, why are we extending the closure of the border with the U.S.? Is this because you have fears that the U.S. president will open up the economy too early? Is it because they're unable to manage this pandemic? Why? We have closed our borders to international travelers for many weeks now, and this was for people from all countries of the world. We took a few extra days to do this with the U.S. because we needed to make sure that the border closure would be a coordinated approach and that we be able to keep our supply chain flowing and that we would be able to act together with our neighbor and partner. These measures were essential to protect Canadians and to limit the spread of the virus, and we will continue with these measures for many weeks to come.
We made the decision a number of weeks ago to close our borders to international travelers. We recognized that this was a significant measure, but was an important one in order to prevent further spread of COVID-19 from coming in from overseas. It has contributed to why we are now in many parts of the country talking about seeing a flattening of the curve, which is good news. We included the United States in those measures because these are measures that we put in place around the world. We did take a couple more days to ensure that we were properly coordinated with our closest neighbor and most important trading partner, and that was very, very effective in it being a mutually agreed on and carefully coordinated measure. We will continue those measures both with the United States and with the world for what is undoubtedly going to be many more weeks.
Sur les négociations avec l'opposition pour le Parlement.
With regards to negotiating with the opposition parties for the opening up of the House of Commons, you are able to reach an agreement with the U.S. Why can't you reach an agreement with the opposition parties in Canada? We have a situation where there are many parties who agree. They agree that we should proceed with measures to have a limited sitting of the House of Commons each week. But there's one party that wants to have a parliament sitting 4 or 5 days a week, and I don't think that's the correct thing to do. I don't think it's balanced, and we're continuing with our discussions.
Many parties, opposition parties, are in agreement that limited sittings every week are a good measure to both ensure accountability and continue the work that we're needing to do to pass legislation for Canadians. We are, of course, looking forward to being able to see more virtual parliamentary sittings that will allow MPs from all around the country, not just from the National Capital Region, being able to participate. There is one party that still wants more than I think is wise at this particular time in terms of a public safety approach and in terms of ensuring that we are getting that balance right in moving forward for protecting our institutions. But we are hopeful that we're going to get to a good place soon. Merci tout le monde.
Je vous laisse deviner.